I'm hoping it's up. I don't know. It takes a while for YouTube to do it. Anyway, let's see. I'm Speed of Sound, and I don't know much. Uh, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Salvador Cordova. I'm a creationist. Um, as a disclaimer, I do work for a relatively well-known creationist, John Sanford, retired Cornell professor and geneticist. So what I say tonight is my own, but obviously some things I'll say do relate to my work. But my views are my own views. They don't necessarily represent his views or anyone else's.
Okay.
So that's a little bit about me.
Okay. Uh, we were. I was. I guess the thing I like most about you is that number one, I liked you. You were you were very reasonable and logical, and you were nice. With Snake was right when you did the debate, and then you started talking about chromosome regions, and I was really excited about that because I've been. I think I stumbled on them 6 months ago, and I was like, wow, this is really cool stuff that I hadn't heard about before. And I looked it up in some of my cell biology books, and they make brief mention of it, like 1 or 2 pages. But it is obviously some pretty new stuff. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And then I, I guess, okay, I'm an atheist, like a hard atheist. I justify my atheism. I'm not one of the new wave atheists who say they're agnostic or whatever. I believe there are no gods. And I came to that position probably over my lifetime, but more seriously in the last 12 years from studying neuroscience and neurophilosophy. And I'm also what I call a strict naturalist. I don't believe math is an abstract thing. I believe everything is physical, and I think the physical universe is an incredibly complex mathematical crystal, that is very beautiful. And I guess if we'll get into the religion part of it a little bit, but and you may have questions, but I have been basically a secular Buddhist since I was 15 years old. I had what you call an awakening, or you would call it a born again experience, I think, when I was 15. And my mom took me to church from the time I was 6 until I was 8. And when I was 8 years old, I told her that I did not like it. I did not believe it. And so I became an atheist at 8 years old, roughly, if I ever was a theist. And then I got into the secular Buddhism, and that has sort of defined my life. At age 24, because I am an alcoholic, I joined a 12-step program that emphasized a spiritual path, and I integrated a secular form of Buddhism with that. So that kind of brought me through my entire life. And I have struggled with alcoholism all of my life. I'm 13 years sober now, and
By the way, congratulations. I've had
thanks.
alcoholics in my family, so you
Yep,
don't have
it's
to explain. All right,
oh yeah, we're devious little devils. We do the craziest things. We drink at the worst possible times. But so anyway, my life has been sort of peppered with. I think I've been sober and in AA for most of my life, probably 60%. But there have been periods of basically going out and doing what we call research on alcoholism. You go out and research the problem and find out again that no, I can't do this. I can't do this. So anyway, my current sobriety round is 13 years, which but it has a lot to do with spirituality, and it has a lot to do with prayer, meditation, and all of that, which sounds a little strange coming from an atheist, but it all makes sense to me. So that's kind of where I'm at, and I understand. I have a lot of questions for you about creationism.
well, thank you. I wanted to explain something. If you see me looking here, I'm not
Yeah,
ignoring you. Every now and then, I have two screens here. So if you see me look here,
yeah,
and
I've got.
I was just jotting down some things about your interest in neuroscience and
Okay.
that you're an atheist, because
Yeah,
neuroscience is something I'm actually very interested in, and I've had a
good.
little fight in my church with some people over neuroscience.
Okay.
So that we'll have something probably in common
Right.
in discussing that. Uh, Biology is just infinitely interesting,
Yes.
and it's actually become more interesting in the present day, especially to engineers and computer guys, because
Yeah.
there are many engineering and computer science or information theory type metaphors. Although you'll hear me say I don't like being too quick to apply information theory
Right.
to biology, but it's there are parts of it that are very hard to run away from because there's lots of signaling.
Yeah.
There's a lot of storage and chain. There's the literature's biological literature is rich with engineering terms, and anyone who's in computer science will feel very comfortable in some of those realms. So I'm very flattered you're interested in some of the stuff happening with the chromosome, because it is
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
engineering oriented.
Yeah. I guess biosemiotics got into about 2012 with
Hmm.
Terence Deacon's book. I forget what the
I'm
name
not
is.
familiar with it.
Okay. It is Incomplete Nature. And it was sort of the turning over where the biology camp is kind of split right now between the people that will say, it's all chemicals, and the others that will say, no, it's information. It's biosemiotics, that
Oh yes, yes.
these
I'm sorry. Now the now the term rings a bell. I've had
right.
some interaction with them.
Yeah, and well, you met. Well, I won't bring his name up. I'm sorry. I was gonna mention the guy you talked to the other night, who I debated once, who I opposed very strongly.
Oh, John. Sorry.
Maddox. Okay, we
Sorry.
can say John Maddox. Anyway,
I'm not hating on anyone, John.
no,
I
no,
consider
me
John
neither. I
in my
love John. Just love him. But yeah, biosemiotics is something I've got stacks of books over here on information theory and biology, and I got into that probably in 2012. And I noticed there's a real rift in the community right now. But there's sort of the new wave of biology and genetics, which is coming along to this complicated information structure, and seeing life as this self-creating informational cycle. And it's really interesting how much pushback there still is from some biologists on this, because it makes so much sense. I mean, life is obviously much different than rocks. you know Something is going on there, and so it kind of amazes me, but I have been getting into that a bit, and that's interesting.
Well, I'm very flattered that you talked to me. There's certainly other sources that are far more versant in this, and some of the things that I may convey to you today, uh, it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but not so much so that whatever I say is at least 5 minutes obsolete, because the
Yeah.
fields are moving so fast. And I was preparing some slides, and I'm like, this was 2017, and I'm just like, even in 3 years,
Yeah.
things have moved so fast. I mean, sometimes when I'm preparing a talk, uh, a paper will come out, and I'm just like, wow, that just
Yeah. Yeah.
that blindsided me, because this is a brand new development, and it kind of makes obsolete everything I'm just about ready to say.
Right.
So just a little caveat, but it doesn't invalidate it. It usually will build upon it.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
my caveat is I'm a student. I mean, I was a computer guy, studied neuroscience, studied organic chemistry all my life, but I am not a biologist. I just started probably 2.5 years ago.
did did you self-teach yourself organic
Yes.
chemistry?
Yeah, when I
Oh my
was like
goodness.
13 years old.
You know what? You and I have maybe a lot of sympathies. I I don't know how you feel about the current educational institutions, but I do feel that, at least when I went to school, the prices were modestly reasonable. But now I'm just
Yeah.
like, the amount that they charge people to basically self-teach,
Right.
and they'll award you a diploma.
Yeah.
I I'm not happy with that
Yeah.
because I want people to learn things. I don't want them to be just, when they can learn things for free on their own and if they're motivated. I don't want barriers to people learning and acquiring
Right.
knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, like Coursera and some companies like that, they offer a lot of free content, but if you want accreditation of any kind, you got to pay. But some of them are just horribly expensive. Fortunately, I am 69 years old. In Minnesota, I get to go to college for $12 a credit. So if
Fabulous.
yeah, and I've
Fabulous.
uh, I've taken a few. Let's say I took logic and some mathematics courses over at the junior college, and I want to take some neuroscience courses at the University of Minnesota if I ever get time to do that. It takes a lot of time, but $12 a credit, I can do it.
I've
This
been,
Go ahead.
yeah, I've been to Minnesota,
Ah,
uh,
okay.
and okay, a little bit about me. I used to be a skilled gambler before I got kicked out of the casinos.
Ah, okay.
So I visited some of the casinos, some of the Indian casinos up there near the Twin Cities.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
What
that
is
was fun.
what is the big one in Shakopee?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Shakopee. Yeah.
that one. Yes, I went there. I I had a aversion to gambling all my life. I'm an alcoholic, but I hate gambling. But a lot of my relatives are into it.
Let's
They're
see, Little Six Casino, I think. I don't know if that was in
it's a
Minnesota.
Midwakaton. I can never think of the. See, I don't know casinos much. I got
Oh,
screens over there too. So
so Little Six, Mystic Lake. I'm sorry.
Mystic Lake.
Mystic
There you go.
Lake. Oh,
I mean, it's
yeah.
big. They have big name entertainers, and it's like the size of the Mall of America. It's gigantic.
So,
It's
yeah, well, I mean, while we're talking about it, that's actually where I was very fascinated because I'm somewhat math guy.
okay.
I, one of my degrees is in math, but then when I meet some of my colleagues, I'm just like, yeah, I'm an idiot compared to them. They're like savants with their their math. But anyway, I actually was in the credits of the documentary Holy Rollers, which is about Christian skilled gamblers.
Oh,
They took
cool.
the casinos for $3.5 million. So there's kind of a little clique, uh,
Ah,
kind of an isolated clique. It's Holy Rollers, the story of card counting Christians.
I
So
will watch that.
I'm not in the movie. You'll just see it.
Yeah,
It'll mention Salvador.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I do this for the skilled gamblers, and they're kind of a legend. And so that's just a little tidbit. So when you mentioned Minnesota, I was just like, that was one of my favorite casinos.
Yeah, yep. Well, let's see. On your young Earth, okay, are you a young Earth creationist? Do you
Yes, I
think?
am. I'm a young cosmos creationist, which means I also believe the universe is young.
How
Now, I
young?
will say this: my beliefs. I would say that part of my faith, I'd say, is a mustard seed. It's There are a lot of problems
Okay.
with young cosmos model, and young Earth creationists don't like me saying that. And I'll say, guys, there are severe problems with your models for distant starlight and also radiometric dating. And I know you don't want me saying that, but that's just the way it is. And I used to be an evolutionist, and I became an old Earth creationist. I'm 50. I'm 57, and so for about 30 years, 30 years, I was an old Earth creationist. I became a old Earth creationist at about age 15. I actually liked evolutionary theory, at least kind of the naive version of it.
Right.
Um, Not the one that so much involved natural selection and the struggle for existence and all the
Yeah.
competition, but the idea that simple things will just improve and um, become more complex, and the idea that the human race will get better and better, and society will get better, and we'll go to the stars and explore, and
Right.
it'll be never-ending, just utopia. I mean, of course, I was just a kid. I didn't,
Yeah.
you know, I kids have their own ideas about things, and so I was raised in a Roman Catholic home, and then I became a Presbyterian, an evangelical. So that's a little bit about my my views. And about 20 years ago, I nearly left the Christian faith. I was not very happy with a lot of how I was treated when I asked questions at church. I was actually shocked when I'd express doubts or raise questions, and it was an environment that I didn't like, where tough questions were unwelcome.
Yeah.
And whereas being an engineer and scientist in the defense industry, skepticism was welcome. You're skeptical about yourself. You're skeptical. That's why you have independent verification and validation of your software, because you're fallible. And I just did not like the climate in church. So I nearly left the Christian faith, and I said, well, I don't hate the idea of eternal life. I said that'd be really kind of nice, and I said there are a lot of problems with believing. I mean, why isn't God as real to my senses as the air we breathe? And there's some really bad things that come down. Even in my own church today, there's a young 5-year-old girl who has leukemia, and I said, it's kind of hard to reconcile that with a loving God. And this is a personal thing, but I think I should talk about it more. My aunt, her name's Connie Reyes. People can Google her. It was an unsolved murder case for 12 years. She was raped and murdered. And I'm just like, well, this world's really bad, and it's kind of hard to reconcile. So I had all these questions, and I said, if God's there, he's really hidden. But I said, well, I don't have anything better to do with my life at the time. My dad passed away, and I was just kind of going crazy from that. Someone I loved very much was gone, and I prayed a lot that he would live, and he didn't. So I just crawled around. I said, well, Christians aren't really, God bless them. They're very kind, a lot of them. Some of them are total jerks, and I eventually find out that they leave the faith, and it doesn't surprise me. I've been part of a congregation recently. The pastor got kicked out because he got caught beating his wife and kids. And I said, yeah, why doesn't that not surprise me? So when I say that I like being around atheists, there's a reason for it, because there's some bad things that happen in church. And I said, you know what? I'm just not going to go by the personalities.
Yeah.
The questions that matter are not whether these people are good or bad. Ultimately, that's irrelevant to me personally. The questions that matter are, is Christ who he said? Or if I can't really even prove that, can I at least talk about the creation evolution controversy? Maybe I could reconstruct that. I don't know that that'll get me to the Christian faith, but maybe I could just, sometimes when you're just kind of crawling around, it's like, okay, I'll just grab what I can. And that's kind of where I was 20 years ago. And I got very fascinated. Now, I ended up having a chip on my shoulder. In 2005, I started a little ID discussion group at my undergraduate alma mater. I'd actually been at George Mason University sometime, because while I was working as an engineer and scientist, I actually was taking classes, so I kept accumulating degrees. So I'd work during the day and go to school at night. And I really was not the best student. I have 5 degrees now. 4 of them are accredited, but I actually flunked out of my first college. So when you said you're a high school dropout, on a lot of levels I could relate to that, because coursework goes on a certain clock, and if my clock isn't in sync with the course schedule, I'm just it's going to be a challenge. And that's being on the right clock of the rest of society has been a big challenge for me. And it's something that I'm working through. I'm not anti-society. I just, it's hard for me. There's some biological things with my circadian rhythms that make it a little bit difficult, just from the even physiological level. So in that process, like I said, I got a chip on my shoulder. I started an ID group. A professor of biology attended my first meeting, and there happened to be a reporter from Nature, and he was taking down our stories. And I didn't quite know all the story about the biology professor who dropped in my meeting. Well, I learned later that she was a Christian but she had been what they call a theistic evolutionist. She believed in universal common descent and the story of evolution. But 6 years earlier, she began to have doubts because she had to teach courses, and she started asking questions. And she was very dissatisfied with the questions. She thought evolutionary biology was solved. So not that I would agree with her being a little bit too open to her students about her beliefs. I felt that was, I would have, I would have advised her. Her name is Carolyn Crocker. I would have advised her not to be that way. And she got dismissed from the university. The official reason was it was just kind of like a reduction in force or a contract expiring. But I think the sentiment there, and I was on the ground, despite what you may hear on the internet, there was a lot of hostility toward her. And I do believe that there were some really dishonest things and kind of shady things that were done. I will not donate to George Mason University because even though it's my alma mater, I just thought I'm ashamed of their dirty dealings. I mean, that's not just true of, dealing with creationists. There's a lot of corruption in academia. So I'm not singling out what happened to Dr. Crocker just because she was a Christian. There's just a lot of garbage. But anyway, I was still upset over it. Her students absolutely adored her. And that kind of put a little chip on my shoulder. Ironically, at that university awarded 3 PhDs to young Earth creationists in biology. Gordon Wilson, Timothy Standish, and Timothy Brophy. So there we have an ID proponent, a PhD professor, and then 3 young Earth creationists, PhD biology students who graduated. So that was a little bit of my background, and that environment kind of struck my interest. And I just began asking questions over the last several years. In 2014, after I left a think tank, working for a think tank in 2014, Dr. Sanford hired me as a part-time research assistant. At the time, I didn't have any formal biological training, but he said I had the right mindset. He wanted an engineer as one of his research assistants. He has several research assistants. And as I began to study this, I began to, be more and more convinced that it's true. But I say again, it's a mustard seed of faith. I'm not going to go around saying that my understanding is infallible. Yeah. Although there's certainly some people I encounter in the young Earth creation movement that have the attitude that they, their position, their understanding of reality is infallible, and I don't get along with them too well.
I've run into a few of those. Yeah.
So I'm more circumspect, and
and I think that's that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, because you kind of amazed me with some of the things that you said that are sort of dogma in the young Earth creationist world, that you said, well, maybe not. You were sort of like, let's look at this from another angle, and I appreciated that. That was pretty cool.
Thank you.
But mostly what I heard you say in your debate, it kind of sounded like probability was your thing for ID. The probability of things happening.
Yes, yes. That's one of them. I've moved from one specialty to another, so yeah. I'm not a specialist, but that has been something that has been on my mind, and obviously since of my background in the casinos, actually I used casino math. The law of large numbers plays a lot in beating casinos. Yeah. Or casinos beating you. So
yeah. One of another problem I kind of have with the young Earth creationist community is they keep talking about evolutionists, and they tell me things like I'm mad at God, and it is because of my evolutionist worldview that I'm an atheist, and none of those things are true. So I mean,
I can sympathize, because I've had young Earth creationists say that to me when I was a young Earth creationist.
Yeah. Okay.
They'll say, "Oh, the reason you're not affirming what I just said was, they'll say you're cozying up to academia," and I'm like, that's a lie.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to you. I said, that's a false witness. I'm just trying to tell it the way that I see it as someone that is, that does have some science background. And so I said, if they'll do that to me, how much more to anyone else? I recently just unfriended someone permanently because he was saying I'm slandering other creationists by saying that we don't have really good evidence for cosmology. I'm
Right.
just like, I'm absolutely not doing that. I said, I've been to creationist conferences. They're papers that have been published that are public, and they'll say the same thing that I just said, but I'm not out there to be marketing for amusement parks, to be hawking donations for creationist amusement parks, where,
Right.
sometimes you're kind of motivated to maybe not tell it exactly like it is. And, I said, if you're a young earth creationist, you would want to engage the problems that are out there. And the first thing in engaging problems that are out there is admitting that there is a problem. They said, we're not going to move forward if you're just going to be in denial that there's no problem. So
Right.
I get a lot of flack from that. So I sympathize with what you're saying. And I'm sorry you see, I'm a lot more exercised tonight than I was the other night talking to Snake, because that's where sometimes I have friction,
Yeah.
So
Well, one of the reasons why, like, when they call me an evolutionist, like it's a dirty word, there's something that's going to take me a little while to explain it. But let me explain it this way. But have you heard of last Thursdayism? Like,
mhm.
where you believe
Yeah.
everything, the entire universe was created last Thursday, including your memories and all of that. So that's, one metaphysical idea, and everything is evidence for last Thursdayism, because last Thursday the world was created just the way it is. Was then, and what's happening today is related to that. So there's no denying it. And I'd like to add that next Wednesday it's all going to end, and we're going to go back to last Thursday. So you and I are going to be having this talk for eternity. so so anyway, that's one metaphysical way of looking at it. But then I was thinking about me as an evolutionist and what I've been doing in the last 2 years that I've been studying this, and I I have problems with believing things until I understand how they work. So one thing I came up with is that I could be a like my body, 100 trillion cells, with 100 quintillion operations going on every second. How can that possibly be from random chemicals bumping into each other stochastically, at an incredible speed? So I could say I am what would I call it? I call myself a young Earth right nowist. That I believe that God is operating my body. There's an intelligent control over all the chemical reactions in my body, because I don't believe that it could possibly be random chemical reactions, right? So that's one way of looking at it, because it is ridiculous to think that all of those biochemical reactions, all those machines are happening without any intelligent control. Okay, I could take that position. Another position I could take. Hang on a second. I'm having a problem with my. Another position that I could take is, and this really happened to me, and this describes me. I can't believe that I was once a single cell, a zygote, a little bag of water. I mean, if you look at it under the microscope, you can look right through it. It doesn't, it has some structures, but they're shadowy. How could that possibly turn into me, my entire body? I mean, this one cell grows into my entire body without intelligent control, without intelligent design. And when I looked into embryology, is what I started studying about a year and a half ago. That was my question. I did not believe. I mean, there was a part of me that was skeptical about how a single cell could create all these tissue types, bones, body, brain, all of that. And so the thing is, it occurred to me that I'm probably more skeptical than creationists. But what I did is I have a stack of books here on molecular embryology and morphogenesis. And I started looking into it, and I answered my question about how that can happen. Okay. And I can answer my question by looking at biochemistry and molecular biology about how my body can operate today, how those 100 quintillion things can happen. And so you see where I'm going with this. Evolution is also looking backwards and saying, I can't believe that happened. But then you start looking at the minutia of how it does happen, and you start learning more and more about it. And you start learning about life as a system. And then you start to come to the point where you can imagine. And I use imagination a lot in science. I can imagine how this thing developed. And then, from at least I could say, okay, now I'm an old Earth creationist. I believe that some intelligent being dumped 10 to the 30th or 10 to the 40th eukaryotic cells in the ocean, and life evolved from there, from common ancestors, right? So now I push the belief thing back to that point, 2 billion years ago, where I'm saying, okay, now I believe evolution, and there was no intelligent design or intervention from the point of those eukaryotic cells until now. And then I can push it back further and say, well, now I'm learning a little bit about abiogenesis, and I'm learning about systems and inorganic systems, the inorganic organic crossover. And I'm starting to see where that can happen. And so now I can push it back further. But I mean, calling me an evolutionist is kind of nasty because I'm as skeptical as anybody. I'm trying to figure out how this stuff works. And we know that much, and we need to know that much before we can say, yeah, we got it all figured out. It's going to be a long time. So anyway, that's kind of my position. But do you follow that?
Oh, yes,
That
yes,
it's about belief.
yes. And this is, and I'll tell you where I've gotten flack. I've actually said the intelligence in the cells, like in embryology, it's artificial intelligence, especially since you're a computer guy. We build artificial intelligence systems and I said, I think the intelligence that does the programming in developmental biology from that zygote all the way to an adult human, I don't think it's necessarily vitalistic, where there's some spirit necessarily guiding it.
Right.
I think it can be described mechanistically as an artificial intelligence system. I got
Yeah.
a ton of flack for saying that. And I said, well, I could almost name most creationist biologists and guess, it's up to them to say this, but I said, do you think mitosis is governed by just kind of on mechanistic grounds when a cell divides and
Right.
does that? Or do you think there's some angelic spirit there that helps it divide? I would say most of them will say we would go with the mechanistic explanation, not some
Yeah.
active intelligent design that's there. So I got a lot of flack and just like, I thought this is so obvious. And I said, in the company of people that are computer guys, and you're rejecting the idea of artificial intelligence, that's just like, I don't know. I had problems with that. So I do think, let me say this, the wonder of the cell for me personally, to make that zygote so that it is front loaded with that much capacity to implement artificial intelligence, that's beyond, just to me personally, we would not be able to build that from scratch. And
No.
I know a lot of synthetic chemists, and I know a few synthetic chemists and synthetic biologists. And I said, you think you could even build like that? And they'll say no. And I said, then I'll show them like a little molecule, like a topoisomerase molecule. It's only like 1,400 amino acids. You could almost spell it on half a page. I said, do you think you could build something like that? That's only 1,400, and they'll say no.
Yeah.
I talked to a chemist who's published in Nature, and he's retired now, and he's like, no, Sally. He doesn't know any chemist that could even build something that trivial, quote unquote
Yeah.
trivial.
That was
So
another point that I like to make is that you might think it's intelligent design, but we're the only intelligence that we know of, and we can't do it. I mean, it's beyond us.
yeah.
And Standing for Truth wants me to ask you if you've met Russell Humphreys.
Yes, I have met Russell Humphreys.
Okay.
Uh, he's been a good friend and mentor. We don't agree on a number of things, and he's always been very kind
Okay.
to when I've disagreed with him. And he's been very kind to people that who pointed out that they don't agree with him, and then Russ will change some of his views. So
I'll have to look him up.
yeah, he had he'd come up with distant starlight model with um, what's called a white hole cosmology, which is
Okay.
kind of a reverse of a black hole cosmology. And oh my goodness, I'm embarrassed. I should know the name of the there's a certain metric that it's called in general relativity, and I study it in cosmology. But boy, how my memory, the way I learn things now is, I think the way I learn new facts is I forget the things I learned before to make.
Right. That's
So
what I've always been afraid of.
I'm afraid. I,
I learned about 25 terms today in basically in fish anatomy, and I'm wondering what I have lost. And like, well, I totally lost that last series I watched on Netflix. I can't remember watching it at all. So,
oh, it's called the Schwarzschild metric. I just thank God
oh,
for Google.
okay, Schwarzschild metric. Okay,
Schwarzschild. I actually studied that, and so we had kind of an inversion of that. And I said, yeah, I could totally see the math, but I just don't believe it. And I conveyed to him some of my reservations. We're on good terms. We're on the same team. Um,
okay,
uh, one time I told him, I said, Russ, I just don't believe in. Uh, I don't believe that the universe could be this young. I mean, I'd like to, but too many problems. And he just kind of walked me through it. And I said, yeah, I kind of changed my mind. I said, I'll assume it as a hypothesis. And I said, that's my little mustard seed of faith.
right.
And then I started studying the matter more. I said, I began to be a little bit more persuaded. But so thanks for asking. And by the way, speed of sound, I mean, standing for truth.
Standing, yeah,
Yeah, thanks for listening in. So
yeah,
this is great. Thanks for all the listeners for our nerd conference here.
yeah. We got a
So
few
I'm
here.
sorry for giving me a chance to
Think we
kind
got
of
like three
rant.
people watching.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not a big YouTube star. Uh, anyway, yeah, the thing about about mitosis and about it being mechanical and the zygote, mechanically creating the human being or the organism. It's almost like you shouldn't say it out loud, but there is no intelligent design there. That is an artificial intelligence. And well, artificial, I don't know. It's hard to
It's a
justify that word.
mechanical intelligence. How about we say it's
Yeah,
a mechanical?
mechanical intelligence. Well, the problem, see, I don't believe in a mechanistic universe exactly. Causation is something that our mind imposes on things, and we probably need to learn a little bit more about causation and not. I mean, causation doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Juxtaposition does. Like if you look at things that this happened not because that happened, but they're next to each other in time, and that's how you build causation. So mechanistic, like chemistry. Okay, I
Chemistry.
started studying chemistry when I was, I don't know, like 12, 13 years old, and I read a book by Isaac Asimov called The World of Carbon, and then I read The World of Nitrogen, and they were the most wonderful books ever. They taught me that carbon can be glued together in all these different forms, and I can have all these shapes. And my mind took off, and I immediately saw chemistry. Like when I would be in, my mom would be yelling at me, and I'd be looking at her, and I'd see all these colored atoms moving around. I was imagining what she was at a molecular level. And of course, I wasn't paying attention to her, and then she'd hit me on the head. But and I saw chemistry as this multicolored complexity from a very very early age. So I pretty much had that all my life. And when they talk about it as random chemicals or mechanistic or whatever, I sort of think, no, no, it's much more beautiful than that. Go look at a tree. Go look at a tree or go look at a rock. I mean, really look into a rock. If you look at the inorganic chemistry, the clathrates, and the structure of even a mineral, it is so incredibly complex and beautiful that it's hard to just say, it's just mechanics. Mechanics is what my dad did. He was a mechanic. you know, it's not chemistry.
Well, what I tried to convey in my discussion with Snake on Friday night. By the way, since you're a morning mouse, I'm really impressed you hung out till about 3 a.m.
Right.
Very, very flattered. I really, I mean, obviously he and I didn't come to any agreement, but just from my background in the casinos and because I've studied the law of large numbers, that was my bread and butter. And because, it's kind of that math background that comes back again. I just look at the way life would have had to have started. It looks like a violation of the law of large numbers on the levels that I identified.
Yeah.
Plus, there's some things that can't be described by the law of large numbers, like the house of cards. It's like that, there's certain improbabilities. And then also, so when we get to the eukaryote, particularly something as capable of meiosis, even though it can be described, the steps of development in terms of kind of mechanics, like you saw in molecular embryology and morphogenesis. If I look at that machine, I said, well, okay, let's just use the machine metaphor for lack of anything better. That's the difference between, we can distinguish between machines and then kind of objects that are just kind of the influence of random events. Okay. So that's where I felt that there was intelligent design, is in the special creation of those first eukaryotes. Because even at a lower level, let's just go to the prokaryotes. And that's where I was arguing with the Stairway to Life with Dr. Change Tan. I could see the law of large numbers in play and the levels of mechanical organization that were needed to make it happen. So being an engineer, it's like, okay, yeah, you need to have a certain amount of connectivity. If we define complexity in terms of the parts and the way they connect, that's kind of the organization. There has to be some level of organization before the machine works. It just doesn't get there by itself. Although that'd be really nice if we could just have a random number generator or some other process that'll automatically make our software. We'd be out of work. And actually, when I was going to school, there was some concern that programmers would be out of work.
Right.
They'd be able to make machines that could do our job.
Yeah, I had that fear too at one point. I can't remember when it was that, hell, we're not going to have a job. I think in the early or mid 80s, after the microcomputer thing.
Yeah.
It started to look like, no, we're going to be unemployed. And then Microsoft released, their next greatest thing. And of course, it didn't work. And it employed more of us than ever. And I realized that as long as we have large corporations controlling the software, we're always going to be employed because they can't do it right.
Yeah. So my point is that I will say that embryological development and the morphogenesis, there was a thought, that's where they had the idea, some like in the 19th century of vitalism, there was some spirit making it happen. And all of the stuff that's happened in molecular biology has made it look more mechanistic, and I'm fine with that. What I have, obviously that was part of what I was trying to share on Friday night in the Stairway to Life, is that the tendency of natural chemistry, that's well defined, at least for practice, when they said the quote unquote asphalt paradox.
Yeah.
It doesn't reach a certain minimum level of organization where it can self-sustain, like the homochirality. It's just not going to work. And every experiment has been consistent with that. That's why, for me, I said that's my mustard seed of faith there. It's really too hard for me to believe, if we start from basic chemistry, that the natural tendency is toward an organized machine at the complexity of even a minimal cell. So that's why Change Tan's book was very, very compelling. And actually, an unpublished version of that book, Stairway to Life.
Okay.
Stairway to Life. Since you're an organic chemist, she was a physical organic chemist, and she was an atheist. She became a Christian, and then she had to teach biology. She's a Harvard postdoc, Ivy League. I mean, she's brilliant.
What is her first name?
Change Tan. C-H-A-N-G. Change. Okay, the Chinese pronunciation is Changge. Okay, but she spells it Change. So everyone just calls her Change because American people cannot pronounce her name in Chinese, and neither can I.
I will forthwith buy that book. So
yes. Oh, thank you, by the way. God bless you. I hope you're not offended if I say God bless you. I know you're
no. Like I told you, I go to this 12-step group, and we use the God word all the time. And I have a fairly clear understanding of, or a clear version of what I mean when I say God. So anyway, but God bless you is a wonderful thing to say.
Thank you. So her unpublished book, and she gave me permission to release parts of it, was actually on the physical chemistry side was even better, but no one can read it. I mean, with your what I can do is I can make segments of it available, and I'm going to put it on my website somewhere, or we could agree to put it somewhere, because I'd actually like to work it out, because I don't know organic chemistry. I actually studied biochemistry with permission of the instructor. I studied graduate level biochemistry, and I need just barely enough organic to get through. And I am now studied organic. I'm embarrassed because one time I did, in my talk Friday, I said this is a nucleoside. I didn't notice that it had a little designation for the R group. It was actually a nucleotide, and I'm embarrassed. Yeah. So I needed to correct that. I know,
you mean in that debate?
You'll see it. I said, oh, that's a nucleoside.
I noticed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because they use B, not an R. And
I did not judge you.
If they actually had the aromatic groups there, I would have noticed it. So,
well, occasionally I'll screw up.
Yeah. Thank you for excusing my mistake.
Occasionally I'll screw up, and I've seen other people do it. Screw up basically you're talking about amino acids, and you'll say nucleotide or vice versa, and it's like it all blurs together after you've been studying for 12 hours and. We make mistakes. We're human beings.
So thank you for thank you for cutting me some slack. That was very gracious of you, and I appreciated you didn't write me off because I made a little mistake like that. But anyway, Dr. Tan's stuff would be worth. I've been hoping that I could get her to review it, but she's a really busy person, and I don't want to just impose on her on basic organic chemistry because
has she published a book?
Huh?
Has she published a book? So does she have a book out?
Yes. Yeah, Stairway to Life is her public version.
Stairway to Life. Okay.
Yeah. The unpublished version, which was her draft before she teamed up with her co-author, Rob Stadler, that was the one that she's not publishing or ever will publish officially because it read like a physical organic chemist writing to another physical organic chemist.
That would be interesting, but
so it'd be interesting to someone like you and me, but it's not going to sell books.
Right. Yeah, that is
so
a
she
problem.
Gave me permission. She said, "Go ahead and quote it," and so I'm going to release parts of it. And the part where I was going, I also omitted something in the abiogenesis talk when she said there are 16,199 ways not to conform to that particular adenine cytosine link.
Right.
I said it becomes exponentially difficult when you try to build that railway in a prebiotic soup, which she went through, and you'll see it even a little bit in the published version of her book, is that's something that synthetic biologists actually have to overcome with stair-step chemistry. They have to do one reaction, freeze it, then undo the chemicals, and then throw in new reagents and whatever. And I don't know I probably totally distorted the description of that. But she was saying, okay, this is a very kind of compartmentalized process. You can't just throw it in the soup. You have to you have to keep throwing
Right.
reagents and then stop the reaction, change the temperature, and then throw more. It's to overcome that problem with the law of large numbers. And she said you could only build, even with our best methods, we could only build oligos of about 64 bases. So even with our best technology, she said, unlike the way it works in biology, where you could just build millions of bases together with a polymerase, and it's just assembling it from a template. You can't do that if you're doing it like the way Craig Ventnor did with his synthetic cell. So I think even if you're not a creationist, you would probably find that book compelling. It does have some issues. I do have some parts where I said, well, I wish they didn't phrase it that way, and they omitted a few parts. And that's going to happen with every book. And I actually told them, can you just make this your first edition? Because I expect it's going to have to be revised a little bit when you get some feedback from other chemists. But it was reviewed by several really sharp chemists. One of them is also also a synthetic organic chemist. He's really sharp. And it was reviewed by some of my colleagues. So I think you'll enjoy it from a chemistry standpoint.
Yeah, I'm trying to buy it.
Yeah.
And it keeps sending me to Kindle, and I don't know why. Let's see, Amazon Prime. Oh, yeah. Okay, bought it. It'll be here in a few days. I
have an interview with her, by the way, that's also available. How can I communicate the link to that to you if you'd like it?
You could put it in private chat. I think you could get.
Oh, there it is.
It was a private chat window.
Is there a public chat window?
There is, yes, and the public chat window, you should have access to that. I'm not sure. For me,
I'm not logged in. Okay, I'll just post this in the private chat, and you can release it to the public chat because I'm not apparently subscribed to whatever service this is.
Okay,
so
for private chat,
it would be you'll get a little bit idea of her personality, and I think like a very good scientist, she's kind of reclusive. Some of these really good ones that want to be in the laboratory 20 hours a day. Okay, they have a certain personality, and they may not be the best professors, but oh my goodness, they love the lab. And that's Dr. Tan's personality. She is saying she's not very good at teaching because it's not her love, and but she loves the lab. And so here it is.
How do I get back to the other chat?
Here you go.
Okay.
You get to hear her talk about her journey a little bit. It's obviously not technical like her book.
So now I got to figure out how to get to the regular chat again. I don't know how to use this myself. Now my regular chat window disappeared. And Immutable Destiny had a question, which kind of ties into what I wanted to talk about. But I cannot figure out how to get back to regular chat. I'm going to have to go look at the window.
I'll tell you what. Can you, for the listeners out there, people with access to Reddit, can you go to Reddit /Creation Evolution?
I've got to get back to this.
And you'll see it where it says my interview with C.L. Tan, professor of molecular biology, on her book, The Origin of Life. So someone had a question. Let me see. I could see the live comments. I just can't type.
Yeah, there's
Immutable Destiny. Ask if he thinks the diversity of all prebiotic life at this time would be a viable solution for developing complex eukaryotic structures.
Before you go there,
sure.
Okay, we were kind of pushing back. One level is how my biochemistry operates today without intelligent design, and then how I was created from a zygote, how we evolved from a eukaryotic cell, and then prior to that. So what Immutable Destiny is asking about is we have a prokaryotic world with 10 to the 40th prokaryotic organisms floating around in God knows what. So horizontal gene transfer and these beasts exchanging information, do you not believe basically that could have somehow put together those primitive eukaryotic cells. So that's kind
No,
of
and actually, that's why Dr. Tan started to become a creationist. It was actually not the origin of life. It was the because she was teaching molecular and cell biology. I'll show you the diagram actually,
okay.
and I think she shared it.
I did
This,
post. I posted the YouTube to the chat. I
oh,
can
thank you.
get at it over here. Oh, comments. Okay, I think yes.
So, yes, you managed to, so that's amazing.
I figured out how to get back. I don't know how to use my software yet, so
Well,
my production values suck.
now, I just did a screen share. I'm trying to share my.
Oh, okay. I gotta
Appro-
watch that. There you go.
Okay, that's the diagram that broke her right there. On the left is the prokaryotic replication initiation in bacteria, and on the right is replication initiation in a eukaryote, Baker's yeast. So she was teaching this in her molecular cell classes, and she was starting to wonder how could you transition one part from another. So even if we assumed horizontal gene transfer, being able to integrate the genes into just this replication initiation, she just found that very difficult to believe because things would die.
But now here's the thing you got to consider is on the right, what we're looking at is now 3 billion years after that transition happened. So when the transition happened, we were a lot closer to that mechanism for the prokaryotic cell. And then we had there were stages. There was the mitochondria, that popped up, or the chloroplasts, I believe. That was one stage, and there were a lot of little steps in between. So we don't know what all those little steps are, but I bet we could work it out. I bet we could imagine how it could have happened.
Well, there's certainly people that have faith that the transition was possible.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know about
but
faith. Yeah, I
but
have faith.
But what they say in biology, and they use this term a lot to indicate the strength of natural selection, they'll say something's deeply conserved, deeply conserved.
Yeah.
So the architecture of the bacteria, there's some basics of it that are deeply conserved in the sense that it's very different than the eukaryote. So that means, even as a matter of principle, that even biologists are accepting that this is not easy to meddle with. Not easy the way it is now. So it's all well and fine that they can imagine then, okay, maybe the prokaryotes were a little different. Whatever evolved into prokaryote and eukaryote was different. And I'll say, well, okay, that's fine, but that's more of a belief, and we're going to debate in the absence of any direct observation. Both sides.
Well, you understand that for me, because I believe there are no gods, I have no choice. And I wouldn't call it faith. I have no choice but to look for a way that happened. Okay. Otherwise,
Right. By the way, I acknowledge where you are with that, and I'm just saying it's a little harder. As I mentioned on Friday night, I said maybe some people have a different. If they feel that they've seen miracles, they'll have one attitude. They might be a little bit more friendly to the idea. So,
right.
And I don't. I think I'm going to let Dr. Tan, maybe if she ever wants to convey why she believes in miracles, that's that could be a really personal thing for her, and but just her professional opinion when she was looking at this, she said this is really difficult. It became difficult. So with the specific question with immutable destiny is, can horizontal gene transfer solve this? So even if we had like all of these initiation factors kind of wandering somehow between the two organisms, could it explain the emergence of eukaryotes? I would say no. And there's one other thing with membrane-bound organelles. that was also really difficult for me. And so Dr. Tan, I'm going to unshare my screen.
Okay.
She listed tons of other things, and I'm thinking I'd like to have her as a co-author of that section of my book on the Stairway to Eukaryotes, because
Right.
just like she did with the Stairway to Life, where she and Rob had the argument, like I did for the Origin of Life, that's a little more
Yeah.
straightforward.
I don't know if you can though. Uh,
Yeah.
that's what
I don't know if you can
push back
either.
against. Right.
I'm not even going to try in my lifetime, I think.
Right. But the transition. Okay, one of the problems that I had, particularly with John Maddox when I was talking to him, and I said his name again, and was that we would be talking about abiogenesis, and suddenly he would rush ahead to ribosomes and the modern cell, which is roughly 4 billion years later. So you can't look at the cell that we have today, the cells that we have today, and believe that those are the cells that were the first eukaryotic cells. I mean, there was a smaller version of it. There was a lesser version. So this was pretty much incremental. I mean, some things may have happened kind of rapidly. There may have been, a unlikely collision of several different prokaryotes. But I think the prokaryotic universe, if we were, there are, I think somebody said there are 10 to the 40 of them out in the ocean right now. We know maybe, God, a vanishingly small percent of what's going on right now, as far as what is happening right now. What kind of combinations and collisions and weird things are happening out there right now. We don't know a whole lot about it. And then the other problem we have is right now there are dominant life forms that are eating everything else. But back then, there may have been great for all of those things to happen. And I do not think it's improbable when you have 10 to the 40th experiments going on over 100 million years. So the other thing is with ABio, I've got books by Stuart Kaufman. You familiar with him?
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah,
Actually, my company gave him an award.
okay.
I didn't even know it. Had I known who he was at the time, I would have attended
This thing about life. I have somewhere I have an illustration. I wonder if I still have it up. Not entirely. I'll see if I can find my pick. But basically, I just suddenly got very bright. I have two 55-inch monitors here, so my screen gets very bright. Where can I find this? Yeah. Let's see if I can pop this up, and I might be able to share a window on one of these things. If I can share a screen. Oh, it's backwards. It ain't gonna work. Hang on a second. Very unprepared.
Hey, well, yeah, this is great practice for both of us.
Yes, it is.
It's good seeing, where the other perspective is.
Yeah, he has some wonderful illustrations in his book that are. Let's see if I can share that screen. Let's see if I don't mistakenly share the wrong screen.
So Immutable Destiny said it took about 3 billion years for eukaryotic life to get off the ground for more basic cells. Yeah. The faith is this can be done in incremental steps, and I just don't see it. Just for the same reason, I don't think abiogenesis can be resolved incrementally. If we have a house of, just like that tent of cards, when you have two cards that have to be there simultaneously to be able to build that tent, there's certain requirements where parts have to be there at the same time to make it work. Or things like a Rube Goldberg machine. So
that's the problem with you creationists. You just don't have any faith.
Yes. Now I'm going to expand my screen so I could see your diagram. Let me see if I.
Well, it doesn't represent a hell of a lot, but it's in Kaufman's book. I forget which one it is. His let's see, which one?
Let me see if. I'm actually having a hard time expanding my screen. I
Yeah.
can do it on YouTube. I can't seem to do it on this platform.
But it shows a hypothetical self-creating system, or basically a kind of a self-interacting system, where each of these little, there are inputs, which are, you can't see it.
It looks really small on my screen, and I'm a little bit aggravated. I can't expand my.
Yeah. Well,
I'll
maybe.
tell you what. I have a little window in my screen. That
Oh,
uh,
and you can't.
I
I
can't
think,
make it fill out my whole screen because
right.
it has my live comments, and it's
Yeah.
like if I could just get rid of that, then maybe I could get the.
I think you can just shut them off on the right, but I'm not sure. Let's see if that works. No, doesn't work. No idea.
Anyway,
Uh,
so
Anyway, he just shows that there's like three bubbles here that are basically things that get eaten from the outside. And those things build all these other things, and one thing builds another thing, and two or three things will interact. And that's basically what's going on in the cell. And he's kind of showing that there's this interaction, and it's a constraint closure. And the thing creates its own constraints. And that is basically what the book is about, and what the theory is about. And life, as they're explaining, is a self-creating system, and it goes all the way back to when there were just hydrogen gradients and inorganic materials with cyanide and carbon dioxide, and it started basically this cycle of complexity. And they're looking at chemistry from a different point of view, and showing that it can self-create, creates its own complexity, and it keeps going. And once it gets to the point where it has a cell membrane, it took off a little further, and then it got to the point where it could replicate. And as soon as that match was lit, the whole thing took off, and it became self-replicating. And what I like about it as a Buddhist is that, and I wish my drawing system doesn't work, but there is a drawing that I do, basically, that we have a germline that runs through all of us, and it runs through all of life, and it's all interconnected like a fungus. Like if you look at a mushroom, okay, below the mushroom is the actual fungus, which is this immense network under the earth that you don't see. And the mushroom pops up and has sex, basically, and reproduces. And that's kind of what we are. We belong to this substrate of all of life that is in this complex network that's evolving. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that word. But it's evolving, and we throw up these offshoots which become us for 100 years, or for 30 to 100 years. And we are not such a big deal. The big deal is that web of life that's just churning and creating beneath us. And I don't know, I see chemistry as not mechanistic, but self-creating, and self-creating complexity, basically. So, but
I'm actually not familiar with Buddhist thought. I've not invested time in studying other religions.
yeah.
So, um, this may be an opportunity to learn a little bit more about Buddhism. And could you repeat that about the mushrooms?
Well,
Uh,
basically, okay, a mushroom is just the kind of the brief reproductive. I don't want to call it a sex organ, but I suppose it's sort of this thing that pops up and reproduces. But the fungus itself, the life, the actual organism, is this huge network of mycelium that exists under the forest floor, and we never see that. And some of these networks are miles and miles long, and they're one organism. And then they get a little bit damp, and they throw up a reproductive mushroom, and we say, "Oh my God, look at the mushroom." But the mushroom is just it's just a transient thing. And I look at my life as a transient up basically a transient mushroom popping up out of the forest floor and existing for 100 years and falling back in again. And that's kind of Buddhism. So,
Actually, no, this is where it's a little interesting because so you believe in some sort of, you use the word God, so your conception is that it's kind of a conception of
the
reality.
entire universe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you'll have to forgive me here. I'm not very familiar with other religions.
Okay.
I'm familiar with my own, and then I study science. The other philosophical or religious viewpoints, I'm not. I'm only passingly acquainted with them. So when you mentioned the mushroom is kind of just this kind of great network, it's like life kind of just spread out really.
Yeah.
And then collectively it becomes a living kind of a life of its own. And
Yeah, it becomes this isolated mushroom, like me, where I think I am a self and I think I'm a big deal for 100 years, and then I die, and then I'm not. And basically, Buddhism is about letting go of yourself, letting go of this idea of self and becoming selfless. And that kind of describes it in a nutshell. And it seems a little bit different than Christianity, but if you look at some of the teachings of Jesus, and I don't know anything about Christianity, but it seems like he was kind of saying some things like that we are all together, we're all a part of the whole, that sort of thing. But anyway.
You mentioned Stuart Kaufman, and he actually he's what we would call a frenemy of ID. He's not exactly a friend. He's not exactly an enemy.
Yeah.
He was considered that because he was very critical of natural selection. And that was at the time when his stuff came out, they're just like, well, this is really kind of refreshing. We're having a scientist who's, as far as I know, not a Christian, who is really just trashing Darwinian evolution. And I'm just like, yeah, well, this is kind of nice.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to acknowledge that. So actually, Dr. Sanford has a publication that actually includes Stuart Kaufman's work.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Biological and New Perspectives. It has Stuart Kaufman's work. Go ahead.
Find the book. I don't know where the book is. Let's see. I think it was.
Do you want me to grab? I'll grab my copy.
Okay, we could stop for a minute here. Where's Stuart Kaufman? Physics. Away from Vision lens. What was that? Divergence of order. The logic of chance.
All right, I got it.
I found one of his books.
So there it is. Biological information, new perspectives.
Yeah, I have.
And
so is he in that one? Is he one of the authors?
Okay, so this, yes, he is. This was edited by John Sanford. And Stuart Kaufman. Stuart Kaufman is on page 513, Evolution Beyond Entailing Law, the Roles of Embodied Information and Self-Organization.
Right, I have that book in the other room, the book you're holding. And then
Wow.
This is Stuart's book, basically. It's a thin little thing, A World Beyond Physics.
So I will say this, Dr. Sanford almost definitely disagrees with Stuart Kaufman's book
Yeah.
and views, but I totally respect him that um, uh, he'll give some people that disagree with him a fair hearing, and
Okay.
that's one of the qualities I very much admire. So
Yeah.
even in his book, I just wanted to point that out. So that's my acquaintance with Stuart Kaufman,
Okay.
um, and so um, with regard to eukaryotes, as I said, the probability of um, estimating uh, the the possibility of even trying to calculate the probability of going from a prokaryote to eukaryote is going to be really tough.
Right.
Whereas for the origin of life, uh, which we call chemical evolution, we do have chemical laws, and we can kind of guess a little bit better about some of the probabilities ascending that stairway of life. And so I gave my views on, I'm not going to
Yeah.
repeat. Otherwise, we're just going to be arguing. And, at some point we just like, well, can we move on and talk about something else?
I
But
think the probability argument is really a bad one. we'll we'll let it go at that.
okay.
It just doesn't work. But anyway, there's Stuart Kaufman kind of he probably was included in that book because this is a lot about that divide in biology right now between the new age dynamicists and the biosemioticians and the old school that it's all chemical, mechanical, that sort of thing. And there's a lot going on right now in biology, and it's really interesting. But the biologists fight as much as amongst themselves as much as creationists and atheists.
Yes,
It's
that
continuing.
was very much on display with the ENCODE thing.
Oh yeah,
Standing for Truth was very kind to give me a chance to give a talk. So tomorrow I'm going to be talking about the unjunking of junk DNA. I'll be talking about the 4D nucleome project and the E4 epitranscriptome project.
yep,
And some of the stuff that's happening that's actually why I got hired. Was one of my roles for Dr. Sanford is to monitor the developments and just compile. So
yeah.
I'm not a researcher in these areas, but it's really like a full-time job, just keeping track of what's, you
What's
know,
going on, right?
oh my goodness. To give an idea of the scope of this, the ENCODE project now is probably approaching $500 million total investment. That's not anything to sneeze at. And then they had all these follow-ons like PsychEncode, Mouse Encode, uh, Remic, which
Yeah,
there's Roadmap Epigenomics, that was a $300 million follow-on. And they were proposing this E4 epitranscriptome that was like a $200 million follow-on. And I don't even know the budget of the 4D nucleome, but that was another follow-on.
right.
That was these are all kind of the children of ENCODE. So ENCODE was kind of the first was the Human Genome Project, then ENCODE was supposed to try to figure it out and realize, well, this isn't enough. And all these children of ENCODE just kind of started popping up, and it just keeps going. And so I'm going to be reporting on that.
Yeah,
And
I have a question about that relates to that.
sure, let's talk about something else then, because
Okay, these chromosome regions, that, and you showed one of the pictures that I had found about 6 months ago when I became excited about it. And these chromosomes in the nucleus find their own little compartments, their own little regions, and they've actually put markers on them and found out that they do indeed segment, and they're attached to the nuclear membrane with lamins. And I don't think we understand quite how they attach yet and why they segregate. But then ends of them or loops of them point into these factories, these transcription factories. Okay, and
yes,
yeah,
you're
and
you're knowledgeable about this.
okay, and what concerns me about the Encode project, the question I have, and I did reach out to them. They sent me a bunch of literature, and I haven't had a chance to review it. But if we have all this heterochromatin, that's tied up, basically tied up. We have a great deal of that. How is 80% of that getting transcribed, or is it because they go across 200 cell types or tissue types? I don't understand. I mean, a lot of it is tied up, and I don't understand. And it's I think what they're detecting is very, very low transcriptions of
Right.
certain RNA pieces,
Well,
right?
we do know that one of the means of regulation is shutting off accessibility to genes.
Right.
The heterochromatin is one way to shut off expression of these. It's very
Yeah,
effective.
and this regionalization is also a way to do it.
Right.
And and when I first started this YouTube controversy with Standing for Truth, one of my questions, we were talking about functionality. Okay, suppose you have a 120,000 base section of DNA that is nothing but a tandem repeat or satellite DNA, or it's an ERV repeating over and over again. Even that is functional in that it lengthens the DNA so that the loop can get out there and become transcribed. So, I mean, the one thing the encode people told me is they no longer use the word function.
It's a
They
word,
apparently got their wings clipped on that one enough that they don't use the word function
which I
anymore.
think is really unfortunate, because that may actually be the right word on some level, but it's just
Yeah.
not politically correct, and I don't like that.
Well, it's not vitally functional. Not all of it is vitally functional. I think, and that's where I where I will push back and say that about 20% of the genome is vitally functional to the organism, and 80% of it is this mess of things that we need, and they're doing something, but a lot of it are mutants, neutral or near neutral mutants that are just waiting for an opportunity to climb in and do something useful. And that's how evolution happens. It happens out of that pool of churning, not necessarily vital stuff. But I couldn't understand with the Encode project, if we had these regions and we have all of that heterochromatin tied up at the nuclear membrane, then how are they being transcribed at any level?
It's not. That's one way that we can shut off gene expression, is to tie it up in heterochromatin. What happens
Right.
between cell types, different cell types will then have different regions of the
That are exposed. Right.
that are not heterochromatin. It'll be converted to euchromatin, if that's the right word. And I'm sorry,
Yeah,
correct.
it's euchromatin. Yeah.
Yes. So what'll happen is what's euchromatin in one cell is not the euchromatin in another cell, and that's how
Yeah.
one thing we've noticed between cell types. It's actually a mechanism of gene regulation. It's actually a pretty good one,
Yeah.
where it's actually leveraging geometry. It's using geometry
Right.
to do regulation.
Physics.
That's why that's why 4D nucleome got really, people were excited, and they're still excited, and they'll continue to be excited because now we're starting to understand gene regulation also now in terms of geometry, which we didn't before.
Right. And
Now,
I was talking about embryology and my journey through embryology and learning how the zygote became a human being, or a zygote became a fish or a reptile, and so much of that is soft body physics. Do you play computer games at all? Are you young enough
Yeah.
for that? Okay, I don't.
yeah, I'm old enough. I still play video games.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah, if I'm young enough for that, that's good.
I quit playing games in 1984 when I got fired from a job because I couldn't stop myself from playing games. So yeah, I became addicted, so I had to quit. So, but
Can I
anyway,
tell you a side story on that?
go ahead.
I got hired when I put it on my resume. I said that's kind of dangerous to say I play video games and I love them. I got
Yeah.
hired for that because I work for a flight simulator firm, and so they hired me on the spot because that was the skill set that they wanted. And I
Okay.
did a lot of their software. I did a lot of their testing, and I was just really playing. That had to be that had to be still my funnest job ever. Didn't
Right.
pay great. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I'd be up till the next day testing all the software.
Yep.
And they loved it. They had someone that was dedicated. Anyway, that was just an aside, just to
But in
take a little
modern games, they have physics engines. Like a ball bounces across the room and it hits something, or your weapon hits somebody, or you can't have two objects occupying the same space. Well, embryology, morphogenesis, is all about soft body physics, and it's about gradients and cells sticking to each other or not sticking to each other. It's about things like EMTs, which is epidermal to mesenchymal transition. It's called EMT, where you'll have a sheet of cells, and all of a sudden they'll break up and they'll start migrating. And they have these little fingers that they send out, and they pull themselves along, and they migrate along your limb and build your limb. I mean, there's this immense amount of physics involved, and it's all four-dimensional in that there is a temporal element and there's a 3D element, and you have very few genes, hundreds, but still, you would think that to blueprint a human being, it would take, millions of, genes to blueprint it. Very few genes and very few little mutations can make incredible changes in the body plan of an animal. To go from well, what I'm studying now is the transition from the fish fin to the tetrapod limb, and I'm looking into that. And it is amazing how little you have to change in order to change the shape of those bones and that limb entirely. And
I,
go ahead.
I actually think that the genes are switches. I think most of the encoding information is in the cytoplasm. This is kind of what I might cover briefly tomorrow is some developmental biologists are suspecting that most of the developmental information is in the cytoplasm in the form of the glycome, and also a little bit in the membrane.
Right.
We're not actually able to sequence the sugar code. It's too complex right now, but there's a strong suspicion because we can get that protein to fold if we have a gene. We kind of know it's like, okay, it's going to be shaped like that, but the sentiment that is developing is that really is more of a switch. And even like when we can change from say I'm going to mess this up, you'll have to help me here. Can I call you Steve? What can I call you?
You can call me Mike.
Mike.
I'm Mike.
So just like if we're going to take I think it's an adult stem cell, and we want to reprogram it to be a pluripotent stem cell.
Right.
Just take the Yamanaka factors, and that's only 4 genes, and you can reset it to become a pluripotent cell. And Yamanaka got a Nobel Prize for that. Yeah. I actually looked at the spelling of that, and I'm just like, that's only a page, just one page. You could put all 4 genes on one printed page.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, no, I don't think all the capacity of being able to make a human being, so to speak, or tissue types or whatever, is
in the DNA.
Yeah, I think these are just switches. The Yamanaka factors, that was a great Nobel Prize winning discovery, but that was just a switch. So if as you're saying, that we could just switch genes and it can just totally affect the there's a certain term for it when it commits down a lineage to when it differentiates a differentiated lineage. It's affected by the genes, but I think those are switches. I think the heavy lifting, and this is just take it for what it's worth, because right now it's just a speculation that it's in the glycome, and we may know maybe in 20, 30 years or long after I'm not here anymore, whether that intuition is correct. But I think the human genome of say 3.3 gigabases, which would equate to not quite one gigabyte, that just still doesn't seem quite enough to make something as complicated as a human. So that's
Yeah.
just a suspicion. And also, if we assume that most of the genome is junk, that goes down to even like, say, 80 megabytes. That just starts to strain my own personal,
Right.
when you look at all the complexity in a human and all the connections it has to put, I just think that's just not enough. And
Yeah.
that's an intuition that I think the engineers and computer guys share with me. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I want to comment on it, but I have to take a short break and feed my raccoons, or
Okay.
they're going to break into my fence. So hold on a minute.
So I'd like to thank all the listeners that are here that have heard this discussion. I actually don't have any listing of who's in the live comments. So if you're there and you want to, let's see, Standing for Truth asks, can Sal give a brief explanation of time dilation and gravitational time dilation? Okay, so I should know this since I studied. I'm going to embarrass myself. There are, in an accelerated environment, it'll change the way a clock will run. So in a gravitational field, if you put a clock in a strong gravitational field and put it that same clock in a different one, they'll tick at different rates. Sorry, I was just trying to respond to some of the comments there.
I was listening.
So while you fed your raccoons.
Yep, they're fine now. They quit breaking into my fence. I have a cat fence.
We're talking about whether we think the genome's adequate to really give us all the richness of an organism like a human being.
There is no singular answer. The genome is going to affect the form.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's another machine, and the glycome and the cell that gets passed on, the zygote. That's that thing where one zygote passes to the next, to the next, to the next, and we're all really connected, and we're all just one piece of life, which is changing all along the way. That zygote has information in it that is at least equivalent to what is in the DNA, if not far, far greater. And life basically requires life to get started. I mean, you can put DNA in a dish; it's not going to turn into a chicken, right?
Right.
So I mean, but there is no singular answer. It is a self-creating complex that keeps rolling through time, and it's been rolling, in my opinion, for 4.2 billion years. And it is it's an incredible they call it autopoiesis, self-creating. So it's an incredible self-creating string or blast of life, and it's amazing. One of the most amazing things is cancer. It's amazing because a whole bunch of things go wrong in the cell, and the cell doesn't die. It grows like crazy until it kills us. I mean, you can't, if you beat life with a stick, you can't stop it. I mean, life just pours out everywhere. It's this auto-creating mess of complex. So I think all of these things, that is the division, the division I talked about in biology, the transfer to biosemiotics and information, and looking at the 4D nature of things is what's happening in biology now, and they're taking another look at all of this, and it is incredible. But I think it's all physical. So,
and see, this is where I'm comfortable saying I would say that the operation of the human body, lots of it is physical.
yeah,
I mean, respiration. The way blood cells work, I'm not going to invoke any angels at that point in terms of what I call the artificial, the mechanistic intelligence. And I know you're not, you have some subtleties about mechanism. And so if you can excuse me for the way that I view things,
okay.
that's just the way that uh, I'm an engineer, so that's just, I will tend to view things a certain way in terms of uh, mechanism. So I think one thing I only found out recently, I've known that blood cells don't have nuclei or DNA in them. What I didn't know, and someone told me this, is that it can actually self-repair a little bit. It has information that if the blood cell's damaged, it has means of repairing itself. And I said, that's really interesting. And I only found out this recently, like in the last week. The cells in the eye lens, they're missing organelles and nuclei. At some point in the development of the lens cell, it'll get rid of its nuclei and organelles to improve the optical properties.
Yeah.
I found that really fascinating.
I didn't know that about blood cells, so I haven't.
Okay, don't quote me on it. Someone just passed that on to me. But the thing with the lens cells, I did see in papers, and I found that interesting. I do have a question before we go on.
Yep.
It's about the Buddhist religion, and
Okay.
I don't want to misrepresent you or anything, and that's not my intent. I recently, because I'm writing an article as part of my job on repetitive elements, and I came across this book by John Avice. And before I totally misquote him, I'll give you my paraphrase of him, which is not. It wouldn't be fair to give you my paraphrase of him and represent that as what he actually said.
Okay.
My paraphrase is an interpretation of what he said in his book, and I'm going to try to. If you see me kind of fumbling here, I'm trying to call it up because in my discussion tomorrow. Excuse me. I'm going to be actually quoting John Avice because he was saying the repetitive elements are evidence against intelligent design. And it's his book, Inside the Human Genome. And he was just trashing repetitive elements. And I'm actually going to be defending them tomorrow.
Okay.
Let me see if I can even find the quote.
How do you spell it? Well, I can find his book. How do you spell his last name?
Avice, John Avice. He's an evolutionary biologist, and he had the book Non-Intelligent Design.
Okay, I might own that.
Here it is. Okay, I actually can quote him. I just found his. I just found his that section in the book. So I'll just read. I'll just start arbitrarily somewhere. He said, another possibility is that God is nothing more nor less than natural forces and natural processes themselves. The famous evolutionary biologist Theodosius Dobzhansky once wrote, I am a creationist and an evolutionist. Evolution is God's or nature's method of creation, end quote. And the respected architect Frank Lloyd Wright similarly stated, quote, I believe in God, only I spell it nature, unquote. This is the sort of deity rather than a creator God directly involved in daily human affairs that Albert Einstein and many other physicists have sought to understand in their explorations of light, energy, and matter, and the structure of the universe. It is also the kind of God that many scientists and philosophers, especially since Darwin, have tried to comprehend within the sphere of biology. So he is a very lucid writer. I don't agree, but I enjoy. And the reason I brought that up is when you were saying that you have your idea of God and you have a Buddhist view, it reminded me of that passage from Avice's book.
That's very right on. I mean, but the thing is that, God, when you say God is just nature or natural laws, that's almost blasphemy in that it reduces it. I mean, reductive materialism is reducing everything to just atom balls bumping together.
Okay.
It's not like that. It's much more expansive, And when you follow naturalism all the way through to its logical end, you find a world that is so incredible that it can't be anything but called God. Okay, I mean, it blooms into this great thing that is very, like when Christians talk about God or talk about faith or talk about the feeling that they get of spirituality. I know exactly what they're talking about. And I think Carl Sagan was really good at poetry. He was really good at saying these things.
Okay.
And he kind of like touched on it and give you the view of the natural world as, being so incredible, so much more incredible than we can get our minds around. I mean, I think there's something in the Bible or somewhere about human beings cannot possibly conceive of God, that you can't get that big, that you could conceive of God. Well, we Buddhist, strict naturalist atheists feel the same way. The universe, the cosmos, this and whatever it is that's outside of that, or containing it, is so unbelievably expansive that we can't get our minds around it, and we never will. We can only come close to it with this tremendous feeling that you get when you walk into the North Woods in Minnesota and you're standing on a hill and you feel the wind, and the whole thing just comes together, and you get this you get religion. and it's an odd thing, and there are a lot of hardcore logical atheists that will deny all that right now, but I don't. I encompass that.
Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you saying that because as I read Advise's book, I've talked to some ex-atheists who became Christians. They said, "Yeah, you know, uh, they viewed nature kind of in a spiritual way."
Right.
And actually, it's very interesting because one reason I got when I nearly walked away from the Christian faith, one thing that was very compelling to me was Fred Hoyle's book, Intelligent Universe. And now, looking in retrospect, after I read Advice's book, I understand what Fred Hoyle was saying. Now,
Right.
I think he said he's an atheist. If he's or agnostic, some of the nuances, I'm not going to just say this. He was a non-Christian, but he wrote the book Intelligent Universe, and I'm thinking his postulation was that the universe is intelligent as a whole. So he was a big advocate of intelligent design, but not from the creationist perspective.
Right.
And
Yeah, there's a bridge out there somewhere back there in that kind of thinking where your worldview and my worldview meet. And it's a very interesting bridge. And it's almost beyond a lot of us. I think the enemy of that bridge is dogmatism, basically. That you have to get rid of you kind of have to let go, And I think in the last moment of our lives, we let go. We let go of all that dogmatism.
well, this is, I mean, I have to say this is where, on some level, I wish I weren't the creationist because, I do believe Jesus is real and what he told about the final judgment. And so this is where it actually got kind of hard to be a creationist because it's like I began to make friends with people like yourself. I'm just like, well, this is kind of hard because the Christian faith says that these people will be in a different place when the final judgment comes. And it's so nice to gather with these people and talk about biology because it's so wonderful and amazing. I'm just really glad to talk with people that study developmental biology and are just find the wonder in it like you do.
Yeah.
And so I was, as we were conversing and you're wondering about biology, said I got to ask him what he thinks about what Advice said, if that's at least getting close to where you are, except
Right.
for what you said, the idea that it's reduced to natural laws, that seems to denigrate the idea of nature.
How many books has that guy written? There's hundreds of them. There's I mean, he's written like 30 books.
I didn't know that. I only
Yeah.
got on non-intelligent design because I just the way I stumbled on it is I Googled on repetitive elements, and he came. I just like he had a whole book just trashing repetitive elements, and so tomorrow I'm just going to trash him because I said, "Aha, that was written in 2012. Look what we know now." So
Yeah, I don't know which book to buy. I can't find Inside the Human Genome. Oh, there it is, right there.
yeah,
$26. I'm unemployed.
you know what? You can get it. I do think
Hmm?
I had to pay for it.
Oh, I'll pay for it. But there's a Kindle version for
Oh, no,
$14.
no, no, no. Can I suggest something? That was
Go ahead.
about the
As long as it's illegal.
no, 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 no. The philosophical stuff. Yeah, it's going to be legal. The philosophical stuff is only like I shared the best part of the philosophical stuff with you right
Okay.
there, because the rest of it, where he was just trashing DNA and ALU elements, um, that is obsolete.
And that was also Inside the Human. Okay. When
Yeah,
did he write the book?
he wrote
Oh,
it.
2010.
Yeah, so
2010.
he's
Yeah.
the reason I bought the book was I wanted to contrast the viewpoint that he had articulated with where we are now in terms of the 4D nucleome. Everything he said there, where he was just trashing intelligent design, it's been overturned. So it doesn't mean that intelligent design is necessarily correct.
Oh,
I'm just really trying to embarrass him, okay, and say,
well,
you're so
maybe.
immature, you're so eager to go against intelligent design, you just went out on a limb and just swung in the air, and you're going to get popped in the head because, as they said, this was a fight he didn't have to get into, and he got into it just because he wanted to the intelligent design advocates were saying, ID predicts that the genome is not junk, and I don't believe ID ever really made that prediction.
Right, I don't either.
Michael B. He came out, and I wish I had. There's a video I could probably identify it where he said I disagreed with that statement. He said I don't. He's an ID advocate. He said I don't believe the intelligent design predicts that there's going to be no junk or junk. It didn't predict. That's not part of the prediction of ID. And
Right.
I'm going to get a lot of hate for this. I'll actually say ID doesn't make a lot of predictions. Okay.
No,
All
right.
right.
So,
I don't. If people ask me, do I think ID is science? I said I believe it's true, but I wouldn't classify it as science. So we can just get that out of the way. But anyway, because ID proponents were saying, the repetitive elements have function, and John Avice is saying this is going to be a great example. I want to show how just badly designed biology is. I'm just going to go after repetitive elements because that looks so stupid. No designer would make that. And just like, yeah. So he ate his words 10 years later, and I just wanted to explain. So I don't want you to waste $26 on that book because I'm going to just trash it tomorrow.
well, if you trash them, no, I'm always wanting to defend the underdog, so I'm going to have to see what he says and make sure that I can't come back at you. But
Yeah. Well,
speaking of,
what I wanted to say is I'm going to be quoting. I'm not going to be quoting myself. There's been a lot of literature that's come out by secular scientists, medical researchers that are questioning that. And I will say this: when I was at the ENCODE conference in 2015, it was very interesting. At the very last day, they're talking about all their data sets and their huge, just gargantuan databases. The researcher sitting to my right, just a really sweet guy, he said, "Are you guys going to start recording anything on repetitive elements?" And Mike Pazin, the one of the heads of ENCODE, he said, "Well, no, we're not going to do that. That's an interesting thing." And he said, "Why not?" I said, "Whoa,
oh, what was that?
lightning." So if we
Oh,
get cut
wow.
off, we may have energy. That was
Okay.
really hot. So he went out and he said, I could tell you I have evidence in my laboratory that the repetitive elements are important. On the gene he was studying for like 20 years, it was the telomerases, telomerases,
Telomerase, yeah. Telomerase, yeah.
He said I have experimental evidence the repetitive elements. So
Okay.
I got really animated about that. But where I was headed was this thing about repetitive elements had nothing to do with ID the fight that's going on over it was just these molecular biologists just doing their job and saying, I can't ignore the effect of the repetitive elements. I see it in my lab. I've been studying this gene for 20 years. So
Yeah.
that's what I'll be citing tomorrow. So
Okay.
you can go ahead
Well,
and spend $6, but just as a newly made friend, I wanted to spare you the $26.
Okay. Well, maybe I have a book buying habit.
Okay.
It's pretty bad. I've got like, I don't know, 2,500 here in my room right now, books.
But
And
by the way, do you know Immutable Destiny? He said, Sal, I would be interested in talking with you when you get some time.
yeah, he is a good friend, and if we do another hangout, I
Yeah,
would like to invite him,
sure.
and
We could do
just
that.
talk about biology. And
By the way, I could tell already you can teach me a few things. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just didn't want to
well,
ignore
no,
your.
you taught me a few things the other night. You should know that. I was very thrilled to hear your entire talk. It was very good. I don't know that much. I don't know. I mean, I'm just
No one knows that much. Oh my
no,
goodness. No
no.
one knows that much.
Anyway, and I frequently forget what I do know. I'm always forgetting what I do know, and I hate that part. And then half an hour later, I'm like, "Oh, I know what that is." It's like takes me a half an
Are you
hour.
still versant in organic chemistry, by the way?
What's that?
Are you still versant in organic chemistry?
I did it when I was real young, and then I did it again. I got back into it a little bit in my 40s, and then I've just gotten into enough now to be dangerous. I've got I know where to look for anything to figure anything out. Immutable Destiny knows more than I do, so he is. I think he's more. He'd be a better person to ask. But
Okay.
why do you ask?
I've never taken organic chemistry and I'm having to learn it. And
Oh,
there are
it's
there are times when and just like sometimes it's like when you study organic chemistry they just throw all these molecules at you.
right.
Sometimes I'm only interested in one molecule. It's like an
Yeah.
organic chemist can tell me and can you walk me through the so I'm thinking getting a molecular set and just understanding the geometry.
Yeah, I
So
have. Where is that? I don't know if you can see it back here. You can't. I've got a whole. There's a whole tray of them about that high, of all the. My kids for Christmas bought me something like 30 molecular sets, so I could put together huge, all the amino acids, all the nucleic acids, and so it is fun. It's good to do that, but I, the thing is, organic chemistry. I mean, if I were to go through the books that I have right now, most of it would not apply to what I need to know. I need to know a few things about amino acids. I need to know, about sugars, and so if you covered sugars, amino acids, and a few other things, you pretty much have it. Mostly, you have to know kind of what structures are possible, that sort of thing. I mean, there isn't that much to it, really.
well that's encouraging. Well, again, I do have that it's kind of way I get a little bit a little bit of benefit by interacting on the internet because I do
Yeah,
have friends that are professors of cellular biology and immutable destiny. My background is biochemistry. I have a BA in chemistry. Hopefully, I will gain enrollment in a master's program for chemistry
yeah,
by the spring of 2021. You know, see, I wanted to say this. I don't want to be on the internet just shouting at people and saying and picking fights. That's not a valuable use of my time.
right.
Uh, Tonight was a valuable use of my time where I meet someone that knows something that I don't, and we can either waste our time just making arguments and no one's persuaded and nothing's resolved, or we can at least try to talk and say, okay, what can we talk about that is of mutual interest and we can horse trade a little bit.
Yeah,
So, so the reason specifically, it relates to Change Tan's unpublished book. Um, Even just going through the nucleobases, there were aspects of her book. It's like, yeah, I could ask her, but I don't want to, my relationship with her is that, or any of these professors is, I'm going to only ask them when I've exhausted all of my
Right.
things that be otherwise available, because I can't imagine being a professor in a technical field. They're writing papers and teaching students, and their time is
Right.
really precious, and they're not here to just spoon feed me undergraduate stuff. That is just like so many levels beneath them. I mean, they would probably do it because they're a friend, but I don't want to spend my bank account, so to speak, on the goodwill that I've invested.
Yeah. Yeah.
So even though I got one book sale that I could brag about tonight to her,
Yeah, you did.
well, but by the way, I thank you on behalf of her for giving her a fair hearing.
Yeah. I'd like to look at the unpublished thing too, just
Yeah,
to see how
well,
much of it I could pick up. But
she said I could quote from it. I mean,
yeah,
let me try to figure out a way that we could
share it.
share it. I mean, I don't want to just
Yeah.
totally take it wholesale, but maybe
Right.
we work through sections, and we could
Yeah.
work the organic chemistry, because she did that calculation between the adenine nucleotide and the cytosine.
Okay.
And I said this would be some of the stuff in biochemistry I never did very well at, which was the sugars. I had one professor that loved sugars, and he was
Yeah.
he was testing me on all the sugar configurations. I was just so confused.
Well,
So
Immutable Destiny was talking about sugars earlier today, and it's an interest of his, so might be a good conversation. I'd also
yeah.
like to hear more about the 4D nucleome project and things of that nature. And I don't know, we could do we could do another session at some point.
Why don't we? That's fine with me. And
Okay.
uh, I mean, I'm not trying to be mean about this, but the coronavirus has actually been really good for business, so to speak,
Right.
because um, if I publish this book, I'm going to have to try to market it, and the best way that it can be marketed is that it's interesting enough. And so sometimes being on the internet is a way that I could gauge what things I should write on to make the book interesting.
Yeah.
The book it's a creationist friendly, ID friendly book. But Dr. Sanford wanted it to be, there are aspects of it that anyone could appreciate, whether they believe in creation or evolution. It's the tentative title of the book is Stairways to Understanding. So it's
Okay.
describing the complexity of life, where it's decomposed all the way. It starts with the the small molecules, and then the macromolecules. Then it goes to the cell, and then the eukaryote, the prokaryote, eukaryote, and then the systems of life. One reason, the motivation for this is that on the creationist side, they just don't have enough knowledge of biology,
Right.
and so just to give you where this all was headed. So
I'll probably tear your book apart, so I will buy it as soon as it comes out. Please
actually,
let me know.
one reason that I'm also having these conversations is so I can anticipate what criticism they'll make. And I found
Right.
the process of engaging my critics, it's actually helped improve what I write,
Yeah.
because I don't want to, if I say something, if I use a poor choice of words, I'd rather be made aware of it, and then I'm going to say, okay, this is how I'm going to frame it. So I don't want any cheap shots. I want them to hit the substance of what I have to say.
Could you hang on for just a second? I've got a thing
Yeah.
going on again in the backyard.
Yeah, and we'll probably shut down soon and schedule something new, but that's fine.
If these raccoons don't start behaving, I'm going to stop feeding them. They're pretty bad. They're riding about, I don't know what the hell they're doing out there, throwing themselves against the house, scaring my cats.
Wow.
Anyway, yeah, we better end. I have to go out and deal with this, but we should hang out again and invite Immutable, but we'll be in touch on email. So
Yes. And I'm going to think about how I can get how I can post sections of Changetown's book. Oh, I know
Okay.
why I also want to be reluctant to post the whole book. I don't want people to just go to the free book and affect the sales of the
Right.
book is actually published.
Yep.
So I probably will just have that 5 pages, which is going to be actually a nice exercise in organic chemistry. Yeah,
Okay.
I was just thinking in my head why I don't want to just dump it on there, even though she gave me permission to. I don't want to abuse the privilege she gave me. So she's
Okay.
leaving it to my discretion what parts of the unpublished book I'm going to release.
Okay. Also, we pick a topic like genetic entropy. I would like to dig into that.
Yes, we can talk about it.
Yeah.
That'd be wonderful. By the way, it does relate to the 4D nucleome.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
these are developments that I was specifically tasked for as part of my work to help support the genetic entropy thesis.
Which I
because-
hate.
Yeah. Okay.
So basically, and anyway, there's genetic entropy, and I was going to mention the idea of evolution as being a forward movement. I don't quite see it that way. I see evolution. All of it is change. Things are changing, and that's how I see it. I don't see it as a forward movement, and genetic entropy is a very big part of that change, or at least what Sanford perceives or calls entropy or degradation. I don't see it as a positive or negative. I see it as a change, which is always a good thing. So, anyway, but we'll get into it next time.
And thank you very much for your time.
Okay, well, thank you for being the very first person on my channel.
Oh, well, it's an honor. And
Yes,
you,
thank
I
you.
know you're a morning mouse. That's an interesting term.
Yeah, I thought night owl eats morning mouse. I thought that was cool. I get up at 4 a.m.
Well,
and I'm a lot brighter in the morning.
Well, I thank you very much for hanging on till almost 3 a.m. My talk. I'm very, very flattered and honored, especially with your, the depth of your knowledge. So I will be talking. You don't have to. I won't be offended if you're not there live. I expect it to be recorded, and I'm preparing my slides. So all this your interest in the 4D nucleome, and then Standing for Truth's interest in the 4D nucleome, said, I better get around to doing this. I'll tell you a little something before I say goodbye. John and I were having a conversation, and I think I could probably disclose this. He said, Sal, we're kind of invisible. He said, the stuff that you've been doing for the last 6 years, only 30, only hardly anyone is interested in it. Right? And I told him, I said, yeah, only 30 people on the planet really care about what I've just, what I've been written, and you've been privy to what I've written, but Sid, no one knows about it. Right. And so when the coronavirus hit, it's like, it's really great. People are asking me about it.
Yeah.
So I'm privileged to report on it. It's not my research. I'm just merely a messenger and monitoring the developments. And I'm just delighted that people be asking me. So
yeah,
thank you.
What time are you doing it tomorrow?
Can I check? I was tentatively scheduled for 9 p.m. I'm going to check my email just to.
And you're Eastern time? You're
Eastern? I'm in Eastern time, yeah.
Okay.
So unless I've heard otherwise,
yeah,
time to get it's postponed till 11:30. I'm just like, now that you tell me you're a morning mouse, and just like, what motivated you to jump on?
Well, my contract just ended last Thursday, so now I can do kind of what I want, so I can stay up a little later. So,
okay,
but I still get up at 4 a.m. no matter when I go to sleep. If I go to sleep at 2 a.m., I get up at 4 a.m.
Okay,
I can't help it.
Well, thank you for attending my discussion then, and I haven't heard from Standing for Truth, so I think 9 p.m. is the time. So just
okay, cool.
monitor the channel, and I
yeah,
think
I'll be in chat. I'll be in chat trying my best to aggravate creationists, which is what I do. So
okay.
Okay.
well, thank you again.
Okay. Good night.
Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.